Howdy. Warframe 1999 is upon us, and with it comes many new things, many changes, and reworks to some of the older frames, two to be exact, which are Trinity and Nyx, both of which didn't change a lot, but they changed enough to make them a little more usable in today's content. And today we'll be focusing on the Nyx changes that happened to her, because she got some very nice changes. The first thing they changed was her passive. Now you get 40% crit chance for every enemy within your affinity radius that is affected by radiation. And this will be a recurring theme sort of in her kit now, which is radiation procs, because you want to have them applied to the enemies at all times, and she will also have her kit centered around applying radiation procs to the enemies. The cap to this bonus crit chance is 200%, so 5 enemies, and it is only to your secondary and primary weapons. This bonus crit chance is also additive to other sources of crit chance, such as point strike or what is it, critical delay? Yeah, that's the one that makes you also lose fire rate. So it's not like insanely broken, though it is still a very easy 200% crit chance to get to all of your guns. So very, very nice. Moving on from that, we have her mind control. And this one didn't get changed a whole lot, mostly just like touch-ups here and there with how it works. Now there's a delay before the cooldown starts, or not cooldown, the duration of the ability starts when the period of invulnerability on the enemy, which is I think 4 seconds after you cast it, and you can shoot the enemy to make it so they have a bigger bonus damage. It does not actually start the duration of the ability until after that ends. That way you can get a little bit more out of the duration for your mind control targets. And other than that, they also made it so that it more properly attacks enemies, because before it was kind of stupid, right? You know, just got a little bit of that tism, but now it more effectively seeks out enemies and murders them, which is exactly what we want. Not really anything else noteworthy happens to it, though. For her second ability, this is the one that gets the biggest changes, her Psychic Bolts. Now her Psychic Bolts will be able to strip overguard. That's the most important thing here. All right, it strips, or not strips overguard, it still strips the armor, but it can siphon overguard. That's how I should put it, right? Because if you cast it on an enemy with overguard, it does not actually reduce their overguard. And that's something that me and many other people thought it would do before the changes actually happened. You know, before the update came out, it was like, oh, this looks like it's going to be a form of overguard strip. It actually still strips their shields or armor. It doesn't actually steal the remove the overguard from the enemy, but it does give it to Nyx herself. So she now has a form of overguard in her kit, assuming the enemy has overguard to steal from. Very, very nice. Also, when you hit an enemy with the Psychic Bolts and then kill them, it will shoot out another 2 Psychic Bolts, meaning it can cascade through a crowd of enemies to continually armor or shield strip them, which is very nice. And it still has the base 80% armor strip, so it doesn't take much to be able to fully armor strip. Something important noting with this is that it is still only going to armor strip while the debuff duration is up, so if you have like horrible ability duration, it's not going to keep them armor stripped for long, because once it runs out, all of their armor comes back. Though in most cases, you're going to want to kill them before the ability runs out anyways, and if you're not, then you're probably doing something wrong. I don't think there's really anything else that matters too much with this. We mostly just like that it gives overguard now and that it spreads around. Her third ability, all they really did was make it so that it is confusion stacks properly, as in radiation, because before it was its own form of confusion, quotation marks, because confusion is the name of the status proc that radiation applies, but now it is actually confusion, right? It's actual radiation procs on the enemy, which is what we want because it gives more synergy. And then her four got quite a few changes, but also not a lot. Mostly you can move up and down in it now. You're a little bit faster, I think. And it takes the damage of all of the damage dealt by enemies with radiation procs on them within your radius, so that it's way easier to build the damage, even if enemies aren't shooting you directly. And it no longer consumes extra energy for the damage you take. It also gives you a damage bonus when it ends based off of how much damage you absorbed, as well as sends out or gives iframes, right? Immunity. And then of course it nukes, sends out all of that big damage, which is very nice. These are just like the general changes. Assimilates is really strong now since it doesn't consume all of your freaking energy when you move around. Though it does change it back to a energy per second, because now her fourth is a duration based ability instead of energy per second, but that's not that big of a deal. All of that to say, let us go into the simulacrum and we can start explaining everything with the build. Here we are in the simulacrum with the amazing Gemini skin for Nyx. It makes her the hot goth mommy that we all love. I mean, who wouldn't love this? It looks so freaking good. God, I love it. Anyways, hotness aside, Nyx is quite a strong frame now. She is very, very solid. And even though a lot of her kit centers around crowd control, I disagree with the sentiment that crowd control is dead. Because if 10% of the enemies on your screen are overguarded and 90% of them aren't, you can still crowd control those 90%. And even if that wasn't the case, she does have other stuff in her kit other than crowd control, such as being able to give herself overguard, make enemies, or make a mind control target that can actually do big damage, and also nuke stuff / be invincible with her 4. So let's go right into something I need to cover immediately, because I know there will be people that are thinking about this, and that is the new Arcane Kamisato. Probably butchering that name. At max rank, attacks from summoned minions increase ability strength by 6% up to 60%. Summons gain 20% movement speed as well. This does not work on Nyx. By summons, it means something that the Warframe summons specifically, not just allies. So Revenant, with his Enthrall, that does not work. Any sort of radiation procs on the enemy does not work. Mind control with Nyx does not work. It has to be a summon. So Necros' 4th will work, Caliban will work, Chroma's 4 should work, that kind of stuff. It's unfortunate. I really wish it worked with Nyx because I thought it would with all of the Nyx changes and this coming out, but it's not the end of the world, just a little bit sad. With that out of the way, first we're going to cover the Archon shards. I have one for casting speed because she does have a pretty horrible base casting speed, so I would recommend at least 1 Tau forged, or bare minimum 1 normal yellow. Then for the other shards, we have 2 red for strength, just because strength is nice to make sure we get the full armor strip easier from our 2, as well as getting more damage from our 1, assuming we have the augments, and more damage from her 4. It can also help depending on what Helminth ability you use, which I'll go over what Helminth we have here in a second as well. The other 2 are ability duration, which is nice because it just helps keep the uptime on everything, well, higher, more uptime. So that's nice. None of these are required, though. You can make this entire build work without any Archon shards. It's just comfortable to have them. And honestly, nowadays Archon shards are pretty plentiful, assuming you do all of your weeklies for them. I really don't think your average Warframe player is lacking in Archon shards right now. For the build, the first thing to talk about with it is the Helminth Chirinka Pillar. Because we really want radiation procs on everything, because radiation procs means enemies A, aren't attacking us, and B, they're attacking each other. That's very good because then they aren't murdering us, and they can do a bit of damage to each other, which isn't worthless. It also means more damage when we cast our 4 for absorb, because that damage builds into absorb as well. And it also means that we get our passive to be up more often, which we really want because it's a crap ton of crit chance. The other ways of applying radiation in her kits are mind control has it so that it does radiation procs now. I forgot to cover that in the opening, or say it. I'm sure I showed it on screen with like the changes, but it has guaranteed radiation procs the mind control target's attacks, though that isn't as consistent as we would like. So the only other real way of applying radiation in her kits would be with Chaos, her 3. But Chaos has a horrible casting speed, like one of the worst ever for how fast and limited the ability is. It has a very high energy cost of 75, and it's just one and done. Like, you cast and that's it. If you cast it and then you kill those enemies, you need to cast it again, which means when you're killing stuff very fast, you or your teammates, you end up having to spam this all the time, which gets very annoying very quickly. We do not like Chaos. And the augment for its Chaos Sphere sucks ass. Please don't use this. It's so fucking bad. I tried to make this work, but it's just not good. So we've replaced her 3 with Chirene Pillar, and it is the Helminth ability you can get from... Why can I not remember his name? Corvex. Yes, from Corvex. It is really, really good. Summon a Chirene Pillar that slows enemies. It pulses radiation damage with a guaranteed status effect. The slow does not scale with strength. It does make it so enemies attack each other slower, which might not be extremely optimal. It's a little counter synergistic because we want them attacking each other to build up more damage with absorb and stuff, but I honestly find that it rarely makes a difference. Like, the slow doesn't screw her over at all. But more importantly than that, it also applies guaranteed radiation procs every time it pulses, which is like once every 1.5 seconds. You can have 2 of these out. They have a massive base duration of 35 seconds and only cost 25 energy, and a base radius of 8 meters. Ignore the empowered duration. We can't actually do that. That's part of Corvex's base kit. So this works perfectly with her because you can just slap these down, have them pulse out radiation all over the place, and not worry about it. See, that's a pretty big radius with how much range we have right here. That's pretty damn good, if you ask me. Very, very effective. More like every 2 seconds instead of every 1.5. Yeah, that's still very, very good uptime, though. I love this ability. It is so very nice. Going back to the build now, as far as the actual mods and arcanes go, we have Brief Respite here so that we can get energy or shields back, when we consume energy. We do not have catalyzing shields on the build, so it's not going to give us nearly as much of a shield gate, but it's better than nothing. The main point of this here is so that when we cast our psychic bolts, we'll get a little bit of a shield gate before it tags enemies with overguard to get overguard for an overguard gate. Because when the psychic bolts travel out, they're not like instantaneous. So you can die when you're going to go to steal overguard if you don't have something give you a little bit of shields back. That's why we have Brief Respite here. Though if you don't want to run this, you don't need to. And if you end up going with a, what's the augment, assimilate build, you don't need a Brief Respite either. Or at least not if you stay in assimilate all the time. The Exos mod is entirely up to you. Though if you have overguard up, you are immune to knockdown, and if you are in your absorb with assimilate or not with assimilate, you are also immune to knockdown, so you don't really need prime sure-footed most of the time. I just like this because sprint speed and parkour velocity is nice. You can run whatever you want here. Another good cheap option would be mobilize just for the extra parkour velocity. We have Arcane Consequence for a ton of parkour velocity, which is very nice just to make her feel fast. And it also helps if I decide to go for a build with assimilates and then Molt's Augmented for a fat amount of strength once we build it up. We have Prime Flow for energy max. Equilibrium will be supplying all of our energy needs. Prime Continuity for ability duration. Umbral Intensify for ability strength. Stretch and Overextended for range. And then the 2 augments, Mind Freak and Pacifying Bolts. For the strength, we're at 114 with the Archon shards. And we need Molt's Augmented here to be able to get a full armor strip, because right off the bat, 114 strength is only going to give us a 91% armor strip. But after we get enough kills from Molt's Augmented, we'll be able to get that full armor strip pretty easily. We need like, I think 40, 50 kills, and we should be able to get the full armor strip. So it's not going to take very long before that happens. If you don't run overextended, and like if you don't have Archon shards and stuff, you can get it pretty easily. But I would just, on a general basis, I would try to get that full armor strip most of the time, because it's just more damage, and it's not that hard to do. The augments Mind Freak and Pacifying Bolts are both something we need to briefly cover. So Psychic Bolts normally shoots out 6 bolts, and it is an additional 2 bolts every time you kill an enemy affected by the Psychic Bolts. Pacifying Bolts makes it so that when you throw them out, you throw out 9 instead of 6. It is not affected by any sort of like strength to increase it from 9 or higher. But that is still nice, right? So 9 instead of 6 is very nice. And it also makes it so they apply guaranteed radiation procs, which is also very nice, because not only does it happen to the enemies you first hit, but then when it cascades out, once you start killing, it spreads radiation everywhere. This makes it easier to keep radiation active, and it makes it so that you can just have more bolts out at once so that a bigger group of enemies can remain armor stripped. It is not needed, and if you don't run this, I would recommend Assimilate instead, because Assimilate, even if you don't constantly stay in it, being able to, whenever you happen to need to go completely immune to all damage, is very nice. Yes, you can still do that with Absorb normally, but then you are stuck not being able to like move around. I mean, normally move around and shoot stuff. So Assimilate is still a very nice augment to have. Plus we have lots of Parker velocity to help deal with the fact that we would be really slow in it. So this is entirely up to you. I'm running Pacifying Bolts right now. Sometimes I run Assimilate. It's up to preference. Mind Freak is very important here, though, to make our mind control targets extra effective. So the mind control target normally, when you take over an enemy, it will have a 750% damage increase. For the first few seconds that you mind control the targets, if you shoot them, it will take in the damage and increase how much the damage percent bonus is of the mind controlled targets. That goes up additively to the 750% bonus you normally get. And I can show that real quick on an enemy. So if we simulate the guy right here, spam that out. Wait a second, we have 1890. I forgot we have the augment on. Why did I not take it off? I'm kind of stupid. Let's try that again. I could cut that out, except, you know, I'm a real one and I show that I got that small brain energy sometimes. Why did I put that back on? There we go. Okay, now we come back over here. We cast on enemy, 750. It's always going to be 750 at base. And then when you shoot it, it takes in more damage. How it takes in damage is a little wonky. I've tested it so much with different stuff in it. I think it's base damage, but it's also inconsistent at times, especially with melees. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure it takes in base damage, though. Some things like explosions can be wonky. Sometimes it just straight up doesn't register the extra damage. So I'm not exactly sure how it's supposed to work. Headshots do seem to affect it as well, so keep that in mind, even though you're not getting hit markers. The augments for Mind Freak, okay, Mind Control, the Mind Freak augments, this gives an extra 1000% that is additive. It just straight up adds it onto that bonus, okay? So 1000% isn't nearly as much as it seems like it is on paper, because it ends up being additive. This ends up being a decent but not huge damage increase. It does scale with strength though, so like, you know, if you have 200% strength, it's an extra 2000% damage. More importantly though is after the changes, now the augment does more than that. It gives movement speed and attack speed to the mind controlled targets. The attack speed is what we really care about here, because more fire rate is more DPS, and that's not something you can easily increase normally for your mind control target. And that also scales with strength. So if you have 200% strength, that's 50% fire rate. So we're getting more damage, more fire rate, and more speed on our little dude, which is nice when we scale up our strength with Molt Augmented, which makes it get pretty wacky the amount of damage it can do. You really want to prioritize an enemy that has like big AoE damage and at least faster attacks if you can. It helps to know what different enemies do, because if you mind control a target that's dog shit, it's not going to do much for you. But if you mind control a really good target like an Eximus after you strip his overguard, it can wipe a room pretty easily. So you really have to put an effort to know what you're doing with mind control. So if I come over here, we're going to have Epitaph here. It's got heat and viral just to apply stuff onto the enemy. Give ourselves invincibility, unpause the AI, and we are going to simulate 20 guys right here. Now, we mind control this dude. Then we're going to shoot him to try to give him a bigger damage bonus, 300%, and then we're going to, you know, apply some viral and armor strip stuff. And now, that's some pretty decent damage, I'd say, if you ask me. It also will target stuff that you shoot at. So if I shoot at this guy, it's going to make him its target. That's pretty good damage. You can also see the damage done now by your companions, which is something I wish they would have done ages ago, but better late than never, am I right? And then have Chiringa Pillar out, spreading all that stuff all over the place. Her fourth ability, something we really need to talk about, is the damage that it gives when it ends, okay? This is additive, not multiplicative. That 400% weapon damage is additive to Serration. Sad face. Imagine if it was multiplicative. Still a nice damage buff, but not really game-changing, I guess you could say. But overall, an incredible ability. So what does Nyx have in her kit? She's got lots of survivability via crowd control. She's got aggro as well because of her mind control target. She can have damage done by her mind control target so that, you know, killing stuff. She has armor strip in her base kit. She has overguard in her base kit. She has a nuke ability that also gives her complete damage and vulnerability while it is active. With the assimilate augment, she becomes one of the best tanks in the entire game. She also gives a hefty amount of crit chance to your weapons, or your guns at least, assuming you're actually applying radiation to the enemies. So she is a very strong Warframe now that I highly recommend giving a shot. And I really, really enjoy seeing how hot she is. I'm not going to hide it. It's the truth. That's the main reason I'm playing her. That's the main reason we're all playing her. Let's be honest here. You just wanted to see this goth mommy. Now we're going to switch to a actual loadout and talk about a couple things that would pair nicely with her. So voila, some things that are nice would be if you are using assimilate, any melee that has parkour velocity on it, like Praetos or Telos Boltus. It can be very nice. Also, the grouping you can get from Telos Boltus is just very comfortable as well. For guns, I would just use any weapon that benefits greatly from crit chance. I like using Spirex and the Dara Vandal because the Dara Incarnon on the Vandal specifically, it's very nice, very fun, and extremely effective, especially at killing big chunky targets. It does huge single target damage, and with an electric setup, it can do some fairly considerable AoE as well. Though you don't really need to run a specific weapon most of the time. If you are going to run a specific weapon, though, that you want to synergize with her, I would suggest something that can give a huge amount of bonus damage to your mind control target. And a weapon that can do that is going to be the the Titran. Arca-Titran. Where is it? Here it is. Very wonky. I'm not really sure how this works. I tried influence, I tried afflictions. It's weird. Influence doesn't really seem to do anything. Afflictions occasionally does. It changed either that or the consistency was just even worse than I thought. But I don't know. It's very weird and inconsistent with how you can put damage onto your mind control target. But you are going to want slam capacitor charges. That does help a lot. And melee affliction seems like it helps because of how it applies the extra electric procs, and electric procs instantly when it applies, and it's guaranteed on the heavy attack. This is just a random ass build. I would not copy this exactly, just sort of put on whatever you want. If we go over to these enemies and we simulate them, voila, come over here and mind control this dude. And then hang on a second. There we go. Look at that. That's a pretty hefty amount of bonus damage. Now we have slam capacitor charges up. So if we repeat that process again, come over here, slam this dude, 15,000. Yeah, it's going to make that dude get some pretty hefty numbers. So Arca-Titran or other weapons that can do similar massive amounts of base damage right out the gates during that short period, they're going to synergize pretty well with her mind controlled targets. Though it's not always going to be necessary depending on what you do, especially when you go into higher end content. The enemy damage scales so ungodly high that you don't really need a big multiplier on that damage percent bonus. Like if you're facing 5,000 plus enemies and you mind control one of them, it's going to decimate everything else regardless of if you slam it with Titran first or not. So it's kind of overkill oftentimes, but it is still something you can do if you think it's worth it or entertaining. For companions, you're obviously just going to go with viral application. That's the main thing. Lots and lots of viral everywhere. I like to use the Diriga here instead of Nautilus because we don't really need grouping here. Diriga is nice because it can apply stuff right next to me with the arc coil. I really like that. You can then run Hellstrom to apply lots of viral, and it has a source of little bit of armor strip should you need it with heat, though we do already have armor strip in the build. Otherwise, instead of that, if you feel like you need more radiation, you can go a viral radiation primer setup on Hellstrom. That does work. You can also use a Hound instead to spread lots of radiation and magnetic, like a typical primer Hound build like this, sort of, though I find Diriga to be more consistent, so I stick with it instead. Why the fuck did it switch to Prisma Burst Laser? That makes no goddamn sense. Let's go back to Hellstrom. That's the general build though, so yeah, I'm not really sure what else to cover. I think she is a much better frame, but she, I don't know, there's not as much depth into like builds as I was hoping there would be, though that's just right now. Right, we'll probably find lots of kinky stuff in the future. Some other things I want to cover before we show this build like in mission is going to be decoy. Not really worth it. I was really hoping this would be funny with mind control. I have done some weird stuff with it in the past, but it doesn't really do a lot here. So if you mind control a target first, it's not going to work. Let's simulate these guys. If I mind control him and then I try to decoy with the damage decoy augment, it does not work. You have to decoy and then mind control, and then it will work. But it doesn't really matter either way, because if we unpause the AI, you can see that, well, do you see the problem here? They're attacking each other most of the time, not the dude. Normally, decoy has the highest aggro value possible in the game. Okay, extremely high aggro value. But it seems that radiation overrides that and just makes them target their allies more often than anything else. So it doesn't really matter, and the damage decoy augment ends up being completely worthless here, or almost completely worthless. So sadly, not very effective. Something else that you can try to do is silence. Kind of boring, but it does just add to her overall crowd control abilities, because silence does affect Xmas units. It doesn't stun them when they first come into contact with it, but it does prevent them from using their Xmas abilities, like the fire blast or the green light bulb of death. So silence is a very nice thing on her, and I'm sure if you are a silence Nyx, your team's gonna appreciate you a lot, or at least they'll think they appreciate you deep down. Maybe they won't realize you're doing so much, but you're helping them believe in your own power. Other than that, you can just go with stuff that increases the damage of your mind control target. Anything that applies to teammates as well, like Nourish, that will work. Roar, that works. Though Roar is honestly funnier on Rhino, because mind control isn't nerfed for the Helminth version, because it is the Helminth ability, and Rhino with his roar, his nerfed roar is not as big as the normal roar, right? The Helminth version of roar is 30% and Rhino's version is 50%. So that's funnier if you put mind control on Rhino instead of roar on Nyx, and I will do a video on that at some point in the near future, so stay tuned for that. I will probably do a couple more videos on Nyx in the next month or so with some interesting stuff I find, but for now, this is just the general build that I have, and I like it. It's comfortable, it's fun, and I get to play as my goth mommy. So let's go into a mission and show off this stuff, I guess. Big whoa. Bro, this motorcycle opening into the mission is so beautiful, so godlike. It gets all of that dopamine going, and the motorcycle's also so freaking fun. I love this thing. So far, I'm very, very much enjoying Warframe 1999. And all of the new enemies, we get 2 new enemy factions, not 1, but 2. That's pretty huge. I like this a lot. And all of the new game modes, or not new game modes, but like different variants of the game modes, are also pretty cool. Like the survival, you actually have to put more effort in by keeping the objective thing from getting clapped by the infested. So it's a little more effort into the mission than normal survival. And I like that. And there's also some other changes to like the capture version. There's an endless version of capture, so that's pretty cool. Look at this in mission. You also get like voice lines when Nyx does stuff. I'm not really sure exactly what always triggers it, but still a nice thing to have. I have like horrible hearing, so I can never tell what she says, but I can still at least hear her voice even if I don't know what she's saying, and it gets it gets me bricked up. If I am struggling a lot to speak this video, I apologize for that. You boys kinda mega sick right now, and my brain's working at exactly 5%. So that's a little rough, but we're managing. Let's actually freaking use our abilities instead of walking back and forth like a fucking moron, so you can see Nyx doing stuff. Let's cast our absorb. Oh, I forgot I had assimilate on. Yes. Oh, there it goes. Okay, I was about to say you might be noticing something. Ah, no, it's also broken again. Yeah, so there's a problem with Nyx. Sometimes it takes in the damage that your radiation targets do, and sometimes it doesn't. I hope they fix that soon. There's a few bugs with Warframe 1999. It's not the most buggy update we've ever had, but there's definitely a couple bugs here and there. That's for sure. So right now absorb kind of does way less than it should a lot of the time, which is a bit annoying, but once they fix that, it won't be an issue anymore. Let's get this beautiful Dara stuff going. It makes me absolutely bricked. Oh, do you hear that? Did you hear her voice in the background? I don't know if you heard it because my sound is all wonky, but dude, because she speaks through her mind, it sounds all wonked up because she speaks telepathically. Very, very sexy. The survivability you get with Nyx is so freaking good. Even when you don't use assimilate, I feel like I very rarely have to worry about if I'm going to die or not, because she just steals a bunch of armor. She can steal a bunch of health, shields, overguard, literally all of the crap from the enemies, giving her very good survivability. And she has the insane crowd control with the radiation procs all over the place. I'm gonna die if I don't take this. She has such good survivability, and because a lot of it comes from like the crowd control and stuff, she actually ends up giving pretty good survivability to your teammates as well. She is a very good team player kind of Warframe, because a lot of people nowadays, they care more about what they're doing for themselves than if they're actually helping their teammates, which, I mean, I can't really blame you. Most of the time your blueberries are dumb as fuck, so you probably are like, you know what, screw them, why would I care what they're doing? But if your blueberries are worth actually giving help to, then you can actually give them help. And hey, if they're not, maybe they won't get downed as often, so you don't have to see that annoying pop-up on the screen. Now, let's take over a dude. I'm going to try to take over a dude that's actually worth taking over, because if you take over a worthless dude, it's very depressing. There, yeah, look at that. Murder them for me. Murder them. If you can take over an Eximus that has like the fire blast thing, that's when it gets really, really funny. Because it'll just like fire blast and then everything dies, and it's beautiful. It's a large amount of dopamine that's shot out straight to your brain. I mean, shot in from to I don't know where your dopamine comes from. I'm not a scientist. I just know thing do stuff make me happy. Thing do big stuff very happy. That's all I can say on that matter. If you've been thinking about trying Nyx, definitely do it. And if you don't have her, she's a little annoying to farm with like the weird infested boss you have to do. I mean, it's actually super easy. It's just, you know, RNG involved with it. But right now for Warframe 1999, I don't know how long it lasts. I think it's maybe like a week or two. There is alerts to get all of Nyx's pieces. So you can get Nyx very, very easily right now. And it's definitely worth it. Yes, it's not Nyx Prime, but it's the normal version of Nyx. And I don't know if Nyx Prime is vaulted. I think Prime Resurgence has her available right now. I don't keep up with Prime Resurgence ever, because I don't know. I don't really bother with farming Prime stuff that often. If I'm gonna get it, I usually just farm something else, sell it, and then buy the Prime set off Trade Chat. So if you know if Nyx is available, make sure to leave a comment saying, yo, hey, you know what? She is actually available and it's pretty snazzy. Isn't that big? Whoa. And I'll be like, wow, that's crazy. And then I'll pin your comment, and then you'll get that dopamine from the amount of internet points you gain for it. And then I'll not have to go and find the information myself, meaning I get to be lazy like I like doing. Everybody wins. Isn't that right? I'm about to lose this mission, so don't base your existence, or not existence, base whether or not she's good off of what I'm doing right now, because I'm really bad at the game and I'm bad at talking while also playing. I didn't realize until right now that I was about to lose. So this is a bit embarrassing. Let's go back to the fancy place so you don't have to see me die. We've come back to our back rooms, you know, one of the new base of operations. I love this place. Anyways, sorry about all the yippity yappity of my brain going off in places. Like I said, tired, sick, barely conscious. So this might have been a little bit of a lower quality video than the average, but you know, you'll survive, right? Right? It'll be fine. If you like the video, leave a like and subscribe. Adios.